Depression for me has always kind of been this all-encompassing mass of what I would almost call fear. It's constant, it's aggressive, it never lets you go, and it's something that you can't escape even when you try your hardest. And it's fear.
Depression, I would define it as a deep, dark sadness.
It's a sense that there's no connection to anybody else, and there's not really an interest in other activities and that sort of thing. The reason I'm not interested is because there's no real reason why anyone would be interested in me.
I have been battling depression and anxiety, both clinical, I would say for pretty much my entire life. It's something that has just kind of been a part of my story since really as long as I could remember. Some of my earliest memories have just kind of been of anxiety and even a sense of hopelessness at times. And it's not the easiest thing for a young kid to deal with. And then the older I got, the worse it got.
I've often described it as being in a dark pit and just keep trying to climb my way out, and you just keep sliding down. And it's just very lonely, very sad, very dark.
I didn't have the best childhood. It was a good childhood, but my parents would verbally get in altercations and things a lot, and I just remember anytime I would hear loud noises or I'd hear people arguing, it would make me physically feel ill, like I would get a knot in my stomach. It's just something that I feel like even to this day I still can't even handle, or even being in this situation and filming, it's kind of taking everything in me not to just get up and leave.
I found out about 5 years old that I was adopted, and that moment changed everything for me in my life. I'm thankful that I was told, but from that moment forward, it just kind of flipped my whole entire being upside down, especially as a child. I think I found myself running around lurking for my birth parents, even as a 5-year-old child.
3 triggers that sort of stand out to me, if I have to sort of place them out. One was shortly after high school, when I was getting ready to go to college. And then I had one where my wife and I, our first son, died at birth, and that was a real kicker. And then surprisingly enough, I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, when Robin Williams committed suicide. That was a surprising trigger. And from a certain standpoint, all 3 of those are sort of different, yet the effect is sort of the same in that there's this sort of emotional response to it that I can't really quantify.
But I don't think it was about until my 3rd year of college that things really started to become real for me. Started having the typical suicidal thoughts, the feelings of, how could this ever get better? It's never gonna get better. There's no way out. But I was fortunate. I was lucky enough to have a good support group around me and have a good, core of people that wanted me to get better and that I felt comfortable with going to and getting better. So from the time I was 20 up until now, I'm 26 now, I've been in therapy and I've been medicated for both my anxiety and my depression.
During the time, I was abused for 30 years. So during that time, it was difficult. But after I left the situation, then I reached out and started counseling, found out I had PTSD, and it's easier to talk about now. And if I could help someone along the way by talking about it, that would be a goal I'd like to reach.
I've had many experiences when people have told me to get over it or you need to move on. I think that words can be weapons, and I also think that in that same token, words are wind, basically. If you haven't experienced depression or the feeling of sadness constantly firsthand, then you really just don't understand. I'm not going to just get over depression. It's my hope to rise above it from time to time. It's something that just doesn't die off.
I'm never going to not be adopted. So for me to just get over it or move on, it's never going to happen. Nobody can just move on from this experience that impacts every single area of your life. Typical adoptees are triggered by everything, okay? I live my life basically in a bubble. Adoptees are never going to get over it, and they're never going to be able to move on until they have been provided with a place of validation and a community where they're able to share their stories, and a world that actually opens their hearts and their ears up to listening to a narrative that doesn't line up with the adoption culture that everybody's so conditioned.
Actually, it makes me frustrated. It makes me angry when people say that, because they don't have a clue what it feels like, or they wouldn't say that.
We're all going through the same stuff. We're all dealing with being people in humanity, and it's not easy all the time. That's the tough one right there. Just get over it. Or my favorite is always, now don't get upset over this, or don't get anxious over this. Surprise, I'm still going to get anxious over that, or depressed over it, maybe even more so than I would have originally. It's not helpful, y'all. It's not. It's one of the hardest things to hear. It just implies that something that we see as a huge deal is not as big a deal.
I just ask you to really put on listening ears and really try to just listen to adoptees when they're sharing, because really, 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 all we need is someone to listen to us and to validate that our experiences are okay, and it's okay to feel the way that we do.
I don't know how helpful this would be, but just hang on. That's the only thing I have learned about dealing with depression. And so it's the only thing I can think of to pass on to somebody else, is to just do everything you can to hang on.
I would say to children, teenagers, and adults who are battling depression, even though it's just a generic cliche, but it does get better. And if you're like me, someone who keeps it internal, who's afraid to talk to people, or who gets embarrassed easily, just know that you have time. You have time to find those resources. You have time to open up and talk to someone. You have time to find whatever creative outlet that you feel like you need just to get better, to feel better.
Just don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. Ask for help if you need it. Just don't seclude yourself.
If there's anything to take away from it, don't be afraid to talk to somebody, and it can get better. It doesn't mean that it's going to be fixed or that everything's going to be perfect afterwards. But it will get better, and it can be part of your story, and it can be a part of who you are. It's scary, man. It's something hard to deal with and recognize, but we're all here for you. And we're all in this together.